Your body is capable of so much more than than what you think it is.
And you put it you put it perfectly, man, about just it's just a constant process of trying to find the next threshold and then breaking through that. That's the thing, it never gets easier. Like, whether it's like, you know, when you first start running, it's really, really hard. But it never really gets easier because as the, you know, when the 5K becomes easy to you, then you move it up to the 10K. Then when that gets easy to you, you move it up to the marathon, then the 50K, then the 50 miles, then the 100 miles, and then the 250 miles. It's like it should never get easier. And no one, I also want people to understand, we're talking about training your mind. No one is born with a trained mind.
Hmm.
No one is born with a trained mind. Um, this stuff, it takes intentional repetition to train your mind. Just like, you know, every day, every session you have in the gym, every run that I do, it's intentional repetition. And people, I think, look at guys like us that have, you know, achieved really difficult things, and they say, well, there must be something special about them. There isn't, man. We all have pretty much the same tools, you know, and the way that now my default reaction to adversity is to just attack and push through it and be patient with it and be able to stay present and keep doing the things I know I need to do to keep moving forward. Like, my default reactions are my default reactions because of literally hundreds of thousands of repetitions,
Yeah.
you
And
know, and
discipline.
that's it, man.
You're
Yeah, and
disciplined.
choosing to get these repetitions. You know, I got to the point in my ultra running where 100 miles became easy. I was just like, I can go out and run 100 miles through the mountains and, you know, 18, 19 hours and, you know, probably win or at least podium. And you know, within a couple of 3 or 4 days, I'll be back training again. It just became easy because I had adapted to it.
Yeah.
And so I then began to seek for, like, what is that next threshold? And so I went and ran a 250-mile race last year across the state of Arizona from Phoenix to Flagstaff through the mountains. And, like, yeah, that put me in that new threshold. That pushed me to that point where all the things that I relied on to get me through that 100 miles, being patient, staying present, being deliberate, the power of the spoken word, all of my tools, that 250 miler took me to that point where the wheels started to fall off, and I didn't and I got to the point where, you know, I wasn't practicing the things that I preached anymore. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh yeah.
And that was what I wanted. Like, that's where I wanted to get. I wanted to get to the place where I started to be a little bit
And you
negative,
wanted
where
to
I
quit.
started
You
to,
wanted to quit.
yeah, where I started to want it. Well, I was tired of running. I wanted to get to the point that I was tired of running. It got harder. I wanted to hit that point where it was like way harder than I wanted it to be. You know, we like things to be hard, but boy, we don't like things to be harder than we want them to be. But it's
Ain't
like
that the truth?
only in that moment is when you begin to grow. So that, for me, during that 250-mile race, at 150 miles of running through the freaking high mountain desert of Arizona,
What time of year?
I that was in May.
So
So
it's
it was like 103 degrees on the start line. And, you know, by the time we got to Flagstaff, it was like below freezing. Um, but at 150 miles of running, I realized I have 100 miles left to run, and my body felt so terrible, dude.
oh, I bet. Dude. God.
And I was like, I got to run 100 more miles through this stuff.
So you went from doing 100 miles to straight to a 250.
Yeah, I had done a few races that went a little over 100. They're called last man standing races.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's where there's a documentary on Amazon Prime called Just 1 Mile if you want to see me winning one of these last man standing races. It's a really great film. Even if you don't like to run, it's a really great film. But so those kind of went up into the 130 plus 130, 140 mile range. But that was the furthest I had ever ran before. So yeah, that 150-mile mark, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I started looking too far ahead, thinking about I had 100 miles left. And I had my little brother there with me. My little brother was pacing me. We were coming off a big mountain called Mingus Mountain. And he was like, look, Chad, the things that you knew worked and the things that you knew as truth, when things weren't that hard, they're still true now. Like what's true, what works in the light, well, it works too in the dark.
Yeah.
It's just harder to practice it in the darkness. But practicing them in that darkness is when you're getting better at them. And so I don't really consider myself to be growing until I hit those points. And you don't need to hit that point every time you work out. Like you need to hit that point like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you're anything like me, and so when I don't quit, when I want to quit really bad and I don't, I get like an endorphin drop. So that's what I'm chasing, that high. So it's like, oh, I want to quit. And then I didn't. But if I do quit something, it will eat me up. And that cost of regret is way too high, because I just am like, even like, with like rep counts and stuff like that. When I was training for football, it's like, fuck, man, it's like 98 degrees out here, 80% humidity. I got all my pads on. I've been running into the same dude, headbutting him for freaking 3 weeks straight. And this last snap, I could just get through this play. I could just get through it. But when I don't, and I go and I make the play instead, and I do the extra thing, like, just shed the block and get off the block and knock him back and do this and that, and then go make the play, that endorphin drop is what I'm chasing. And that is where you get better, because when you train yourself, in training, it's like, what's that old saying? If I sweat I sweat when I train, so I don't bleed when I play.
That's it,
And it's
man.
like, that's what it's all built on, man. It's like you're sharpening yourself in training so that whenever you get to that race, it's like, like you said, you were doing 100 miles and it felt easy. It's because you had trained yourself that way. You had trained your mind and your body to be able to push through 100 miles and then take a couple days rest and go train again. And then now you reach a whole new level of suck at 250 miles. And it's like, you got 100 miles, you have a whole 100-mile marathon left. And your mind is like, I want to quit. Like you need to quit. Your body you can't do this. I can't do this. All of the things.
Don't want to do it.
Yeah. You don't want to do it. This sucks. Like, I don't need to do it. Why am I doing this? You start questioning everything, right?
It wasn't fun anymore. Yeah, this is supposed to be a hobby, man. Like, what the crap? This isn't fun anymore, But man, what you're saying is, I hope people are listening to you. And by the way, I would highly encourage you to do some solo episodes too, because the things that you're saying are like really, really awesome foundational things that people need to hear. Almost, yes, I would love to interview you one day, because we're right on board. And you're talking about not quitting, right? And the consequences of quitting. Like, before I start anything, like, I think about that. Even in SEAL training, the whole time through SEAL training, we would see those big gray Navy ships, haze gray and underway is what we used to say. We would see them out there off the coast, while we would be surf tortured right there in the Pacific Ocean. And you just realize, if I quit right now, that's where I'm going. I'm going out to that haze gray boat, and I'm going to be out there chipping paint off the freaking wall of that boat for the next 4 years. Like, it's a big deal, man. And I also think, man, when people stand on the start line of a big challenge, whether it's business or race or sports or a hunt, I think most people also they leave a little bit of room to quit. Like they just hold on to something like either whether it's an excuse or they're just like, well, I'm going to start this, but we'll just see how it goes. And but
Yeah.
I really
No,
think that's how most
you're
people
right. They
I
do.
think that's how most people start things. Like I'm going to start this new business and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how I like it or this race or this hunt or whatever. But man, that is like completely the opposite of how I start anything. So, when I'm standing on the start line of a race, it's a very heavy feeling for me because I take quitting completely off the table. Like I leave no room for quitting to sneak its way in. And when you do that, like internally, when you take quitting off the table, it puts a burden on you. When you're standing at the start line and you're like, "Holy crap, man.
It's a
I've got it to
commitment.
do
I've
now."
committed. I'm committed and I'm not like there's no other option but to finish this.
And that's heavy, man, and people don't wanna feel that.
Mhm.
People don't wanna feel that, man. They wanna leave some way out, and I'm just convinced that you're never going to do anything great, um, if you leave yourself some sort of out. You're gonna take it.
Oh yeah.
If it when it gets hard enough, you're gonna take it, and so I try to explain that to people. Like when I'm on the start line of a race, I see people, coking and joking and acting silly and all this. Dude, I'm freaking serious because I'm like, holy crap! At a last man standing race, for instance, here I am, and I'm gonna have to run until every one of these other people here quit.
Which that makes it so much more difficult. Everything any type of training I've ever done where there's not like a end goal that I can clearly see. And I know, okay, I just got to, because whenever it gets hard, you're like, all right, just push through another mile, push through another, 4 more reps, like just, 2 more snaps, like everything. It's just like you have a rep count, a mile count. And then like now I'm just running until everybody else quits. That is like torture to your brain. You know what I mean? Because you just are like the whole time it's telling you want to quit.
I flipped the script, man. And so I'll tell you what I do, but I learned this in SEAL training actually. The evolution that we lost the most guys on during Hell Week was they set 2 cones out on the beach and they put the class out there and they said, "All right, run from one cone to the other." It was a 1 mile stretch and then turn around and come back. And they just said, "Keep doing that until we tell you to
And
stop."
you're in boots and
And
gear and you're all wet and everything too, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it was just a 1 mile run back and forth down up and down the beach there in front of the ocean at your own pace. Well, like, we got a couple hours into this thing and guys were just quitting like in droves, man. And I'm like, what is going on? Why are all these dudes quitting? Like, nobody's even yelling at me to run faster. As long as I look like I'm running and I'm moving forward, like, no
Yeah.
one's going to bother me. This is great. Well, the reason they were all quitting is because the instructors didn't tell us that this is a 4 hour evolution or this is an 8 hour evolution. They just said you're going to keep doing this, and we were in Hell Week, so we knew it could go on for 3 or 4 days if they wanted it to. And that's the reason all those dudes were quitting, man, is exactly what you're saying. They couldn't see the end. Everybody's looking for a finish line. And there's no finish line in life. It's like we just talked about earlier. It just keeps getting harder. You just keep leveling up. You just keep trying to find that next threshold. As long as you're looking for a finish line, you're just hindering yourself in terms of growth because it doesn't exist until the day that you die.
Yep.
So on these last man standing races, my superpower is my ability to stay present and only focus on sometimes if it gets really, really hard or I'm having a hard lap or a hard mile, just focusing on maybe the next step or getting to the next tree that I can see or something like that. Right. So that's my superpower. And then also what I'll do is I'll start picking people apart, dude. I'll start, I'm out in this last man standing races and we get deep into this thing and I'll some guy will be running out in front of me, and I'll run up to him, and I'll be like, "Hey, man, you look like you're limping a little bit. You know what's going on? Is your leg hurting?" And he's not limping, but you know what's crazy, man? I'll put that in his mind, and I'll see him 2 or 3 hours later, and he'll be limping on the leg that I told him he looked like he was limping on. It's insane, dude, like how much you can mess with people's heads. Just me interjecting that thought into their mind, it would actually manifest in their body. And they would actually, within a few hours, they would start limping. And then with a few other hours, they would be out of the race. So that's kind of how I flipped the script on these last man standing races.
Yeah, I did the same thing in football, and I would say shit to him, but for the most part, no matter how tired I was, I just wouldn't look tired. I just trained
That's it.
myself to not look tired, and that will make an offensive lineman so fucking tired when he's like, "How is this? It's the fourth quarter, and he's not. How is he not tired?" But inside, I am fucking gassed. You know what I mean? But I'm not gonna. I just wouldn't let him see it. Now, like you see it as the game goes on, man. It will wear on a guy, and wear on a guy, and wear on a guy, and then you just when the time comes when you need to make a big play to help win the game, you're gonna be able to take advantage of that. And I'm sure it was the same way in those races, man. You keep saying stuff to him, and then like when it comes down to the final stretch, and you start pushing, you just make it look like you're not even tired. And he's like, "Fuck, I'm gonna quit now. I gotta quit. He's just gonna go. He'll go till we get to 500 miles. He's just gonna keep going."
That's all you're doing, man. If you can just convince your competition that they can't beat you because you consistently show up and I mean, I even say stuff like, I never get tired. Like, I'll say weird stuff when I'm racing, especially those last man standing races, because you're with the same people the whole time, right? So you're in this corral at the beginning of every hour. You're in a corral and you start a new lap. So I mean, I'll say weird stuff like, I can't die. Like I like just instead to freak these people out, man. And you'll see it in that film. If you watch that film, you'll see me saying all this wild stuff. And man, that's all I'm doing is I'm just convincing you that you can't beat me. And if I can do that, then yeah, in reality, you can't beat me.
Yeah, it's all just a mind game with these any it's with anything, a business deal. When you're negotiating with somebody, it's just like, you never show your hand. Just never show your hand and never show because you're tired. But if I just make a joke out of it and convince myself that I'm not tired, then you're fucked because I'm going to win this. You know what I mean? That's just how I always look at it. But if you let that creep in, you're probably going to lose.